Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you Thursday morning here in Southern California. Colin Levy, legal tech expert guru, one of our favorite legal tech people in the world, has been kind enough to join me this morning on Morning Coffee. Colin, it's so good to see you.
Good to see you too. Good morning.
Hey, listen, it's been a crazy couple of days, but one of the things I love best about this show is I get to share talented and amazing people with my community. And Colin, my community is, creators, artists, entrepreneurs, business owners, lawyers. We have a few judges. Don't get nervous. I don't think you're nervous around judges, but they like to tap in and see what everyone's talking about in these spaces. So it gives me a chance to bring in guests and do this live interview, but also it's recorded. And so for everyone that's watching, make sure you hit the share button. Make sure you come back and watch the show later. Share it with your law firms. Share it with your friends. The guests are amazing. And today's guest is no exception. So Colin, let me go ahead and just give you a proper introduction. Colin Levy is a director of legal at Malbek and the go-to for enterprise contract lifestyle management. Colin isn't just part of the legal tech world. He's actively shaping it. And that's why Colin's on today's show. As the author of The Legal Tech Ecosystem, he's crafted a roadmap for anyone interested in where the law meets technology. Colin's voice stands out in the field, making legal tech accessible and empowering lawyers and tech enthusiasts alike to adapt and lead as technology transforms the industry. A top influencer in legal tech, Colin is pushing boundaries and inspiring real change. I always pay attention to everything that Colin shares, both over on Twitter and his other platforms. And Colin, that's why you're here today. So listen, let's dive right in. Law, tech, what got you interested in technology in the first place?
It's an interesting question because when I was younger, I actually didn't like technology. I viewed it as clunky, intrusive, complicated, and frankly, it kind of was because back then it was far less user friendly. What really kind of I think sparked my interest and its impact upon the legal industry specifically was actually my first job out of college. So I graduated from college and then I moved to New York City, and I knew I wanted to go to law school, but I knew I wanted to get some work experience before that. So what I did was I ended up working as a litigation paralegal for a big law firm in New York. I knew very little about law firms. I knew very little about the legal world, really. But what was interesting about this role in particular was because I did have an interest in technology, and that I knew that it was kind of on the horizon and starting to become used by more and more people. So this paralegal role actually was a litigation support analyst, which really was kind of a clunky way of saying that I was supporting e-discovery efforts by lawyers in the context of ongoing litigation matters. And that meant I was creating and maintaining e-discovery databases, loading data in, getting data out, and so forth. And that exposure showed me firsthand how technology was shaping at that time. It was early days, but was even then shaping the practice of law and the business of law.
So Colin, when you say early day, sorry to interrupt you, but when you say early days, I mean, what are we talking? What years? How far back?
So this was back in 2006.
Okay. Wow.
So it was, it was definitely what seems to me like early days. And that exposure was really interesting. The work was challenging, but it gave me exposure to technology. It also gave me a clue as to why I didn't want to end up working for a law firm, but that's a whole separate story. And that's what really sparked my interest, because then I saw how technology was being used, and I started thinking to myself, wow, okay, if this is how this is working now, I could already envision in my head how things would evolve down the line a number of years later, knowing just intuitively that technology moves fast and evolves very quickly. And lo and behold, that's exactly how things have played out since that time.
It's moving faster and faster. I was going to say every year, but not just every year, month, or week, every single day. It seems like something new's coming out, right? And for those of us that sat around waiting for our dial-up modems to connect to the internet, which felt like eternity, right? Now everything is just like this. And I'm getting some questions in from our audience, and thanks everybody. We're live on YouTube and LinkedIn, X, and Facebook, and some other platforms. Yeah, ask your questions. They get pushed into my administrative panel. I can interrupt Colin. Excuse me ahead of time for interrupting you. And legal tech, you wrote the book, The Legal Tech Ecosystem, a couple of different people, and I'm paraphrasing. What got you thinking to writing the legal tech ecosystem? Why did you write it? What was your motivation behind it? What was your why? And looking back, are you glad you wrote the book, or what? Because I think it took a lot of time and effort on your part.
So it was a 3-year effort. I started writing it during sort of the heart of the pandemic. And my impetus for writing it really was that I'm a bit of an academic and a bit of an educator at heart. And I just saw how many people were interested in legal tech, but didn't know much about it, didn't know how to learn about it, and didn't really understand what it really meant. Some people thought, well, is it technology that's legal to use, or is it technology that is, somehow only for legal or what have you? And so the way I thought about it was, I always saw technology as part of a bigger puzzle of people, businesses, and processes working together and augmenting one another. And that's really why I entitled the book The Legal Tech Ecosystem, because it's an ecosystem of all those things that impact one another and depend upon one another and influence one another. And so really the book is intended to be a accessible, high-level introduction to this world, because I also came to this world not being someone who is a computer science major or a coder or anything like that. I came to it as just someone with a growing interest in technology. And so I really wanted to write this book to help people better understand this space, and not just understand it, but see how it was actually playing out within the legal industry through a variety of lenses. And that's really what prompted me to write the book. And sort of one of the, I think, key features of the book is that I extensively quote from from a lot of conversations I've had with other legal leaders. And the reason for that is I want to show people how these others are creating technology, using technology, and benefiting from technology within the broader legal world. And that really is kind of what makes the book, I think, special, and also what makes the book what it is. And so that's really why I wrote it. And your last question about whether I would write it. I would write another book. I really enjoyed the process, but it definitely was a lot of work, and I did not necessarily anticipate how much work it was going to be. But that's kind of always been the case for me. I always start on things not fully realizing how much actual work it's going to be, but knowing that is likely going to be the case.
It's a beautifully written book. You go into a lot of detail, and that's why I brought it up, because it obviously took a lot of work, time, and effort. And thank you for making the legal community better with your book. You did bring something up I want to touch upon. I think it's critically important for everybody listening. Not only if you're a lawyer, but if you're an entrepreneur, business owner, listen to the answer to this next question, because I think it's really going to resonate with all of you. In chapter 6 of your book, Colin, you talked about innovation, and the whole chapter was about innovation, but you started off with, don't be a law firm when you're bringing in technology into your firm. And let's just talk about any kind of business, real estate, finance, whatever it may be. You start off with, don't be a law firm. What do you mean by that, and why is that so important?
So I think there's a couple of angles to that. One is that law firms historically have been very tied down to how they operate, meaning that they operate on this bill by hour model where they bill by their time, which sort of is the antithesis to efficiency. And so technology in many ways is a promoter of efficiency. And so there's that inherent tension and conflict that poses a challenge for law firms and embracing technology because they want to continue to adhere to this business model that is somewhat fighting against the technology that they want to use, which is operating on a completely different model in some ways. So there's that. The other component as well is that, there's a cultural component. Law firms generally, are not big promoters of change, because if things currently operate at a reasonably good level, why rock the boat? Why change that? If things have worked for so many years before, why change it going forward? But the problem with thinking that way is that, as we've seen in the last 10 years, change can happen very rapidly, unexpectedly, and dramatically. And so if you're not at least open to the idea of change, and the idea that change can happen, when you're least expecting it, you're going to be woefully unprepared. And that's going to not just hurt your business, it's going to hurt your ability to grow and succeed. And I think the legal industry is finally acknowledging the fact that by being so resistant to change, they are limiting their so-called lifespan. They're limiting their ability to grow and adapt, and that's hurting the industry and hurting their ability to help others. Because ultimately, the legal industry is here to help others, and part and parcel of that is being open to the idea of meeting people where they are. And people change, people adapt, and so if you're not open to new ideas, you're not going to be able to be best positioned to help others.
We've got some people here that I think were at the most recent Clio conference event. And I guess Jack Newton, the founder of Clio, talked about how at this point in time, lawyers and law firms are embracing artificial intelligence and technology unlike ever before. I remember a few years ago, we were about, at the bottom of 17 different sectors, and now we're towards the front. When you talk about don't be like other law firms, I see a lot of law firms do everything they can to try to be like all the other law firms in town, right? It's almost like you're doubling down on trying to be, you think you're being exceptional, but you're just blending in. In your chapter 6 on, innovation and incorporating this technology into the practice of law, what's the mindset of the leadership in these firms? What kind of mindset do they have to have in order to incorporate and bring in this technology the right way so that everybody buys in, so that everybody understands they can leverage it to be better and faster and create better client experiences? What are your thoughts for people listening who want to take action once they get off the show and start bringing in technology to their companies and firms, starting with mindset? Maybe what should they be focusing on?
I think the mindset has to be one of experimentation, of learning, of being open to new ideas, and accompanied by an acknowledgement that there are things that could be done better within the firm. And really what I mean by that is that you have to understand, your firm exceptionally well and understand where there are problems, and be willing to acknowledge, A, that there are problems, and B, seek out solutions to those problems. Because I think that if you don't identify the problem you're trying to solve first, and if you start just going after technology, that's when it becomes an issue, because then you end up having technology in search of a solution, whereas you really want to have the problem first identified, and then that can help identify potential solutions. And this is something I talk about in the book and talk about elsewhere quite a bit, which is that technology, as much as I love it, as much as many of us love it, is not always the answer, not always the solution. And the way to identify if it's a potential solution or not is starting with identifying the problem. And so the mindset of the leadership of a firm needs to begin with problem identification, and open to the idea of that, a potential solution you think is possible may not actually be the solution. So you want to be open to the fact that you have to go and see how things work and play things out, which is why personally I'm a big fan of kind of proof of concept type things, where you can kind of try out new tools in a controlled environment and see whether they're actually working the way you think they are and helping the way you think they're going to help, and then move from there. Because otherwise what ends up happening is you have technology and just sits somewhere not being used, and then there's less appetite for more technology because people were left unhappy by the first tool they tried to put in place.
I wonder if managing partners in big firms, I wonder if they even understand what the problem is. In other words, sometimes, it's like a hamster on a wheel. They keep trying to duplicate something, expecting a different result, and that never happens. And before I roll into the next question, the reason I'm dressed like this, everybody, is I'm meeting some friends for a walk/run as soon as we get off the live show. Just watch Colin. He's the one that looks like $1 million today. I do what I can. It's early in the morning. Colin, so talk to us a little bit about, for example, everybody's interested or hearing the buzz about artificial intelligence. And I know in chapter 11 of your book, you do talk about artificial intelligence. Why don't we start off with, how can lawyers or business owners or entrepreneurs, how can they use artificial intelligence to maybe put their finger on the problem? In other words, use AI to figure out what is it that we should be doing to either grow or be more efficient or provide better services and products. And then once they figure out the answer to those questions, to come back and maybe use, services like what one of your companies provides to do those things to solve that problem. I think a lot of people don't even know what the initial problem is in the first place. Thoughts?
Right. So I think you have to start by understanding that generative AI is data driven. So it really is, any generative AI solution is just a data driven tool, meaning you need data to make it work for you. So if you're going to use it to, for example, evaluate a process or automate something or, draft something, whatever it is you want to do, you need to be able to provide it with the specific data to act. And I think that's a big challenge for many people because they approach generative AI as if it's somehow a human and can just automatically assume what you're asking for. And that is not the case at all. It's literally just a pattern recognition kind of solution. So you need to be able to come up with what is technically called a prompt that's very specific and detailed so that you can get the output you're looking for. Because otherwise, it's not going to assume anything. It's just going to assume that all the information you've given is all the information it needs to provide you with the potential solution. So that's I think step one. Step two is understanding that different solutions operate differently. So you need to, and this is where experimentation comes into play. You need to be able to be in a position to experiment with different tools to understand how they operate and what outputs they're giving you. In other words, ask this, provide the same prompt to different tools and see what different outputs you get. And that will give you a sense of which one may be more helpful to you than another one. And lastly, and this goes back to the problem identification challenge, is you want to go into it understanding what the problem is you're trying to solve. And that will in turn help you identify the right data to provide to these solutions that can then provide you with the right output. Keeping in mind that, these tools have been trained on different data sets. Some have been trained on just internet level data, which, as we all know, is very hit or miss. Some has been trained on sort of more specific data that's specific to a particular segment of the legal industry, whether it's case law or what have you. So that's more likely to give you a better result if you're, a litigator. But it's all those kind of considerations you have to keep in mind when using these tools. And lastly, I think we also have to have realistic expectations of these tools. They are only a year and a half old. They've already made progress, but there's going to be a lot more progress. There's a lot more progress to be made. We're really at the early days of this journey, and we need to understand that and just keep in mind that this generative AI is here to augment how we work. It's not here to replace how we work, and it's only going to grow more powerful as we move forward over the next 6 months to a year onwards.
I love that. We're early, and this is as bad as it's going to get. I mean, it just keeps getting better and better and better. And interesting questions coming in, but here's one I haven't even thought about or asked before. Colin, there's an attorney, and she isn't interested in spending money right now on, high-priced, legal-focused AI solutions. She wants to first learn how to prompt and how to use AI and maybe just play around with it outside of the office. What inexpensive or free programs do you recommend that aren't necessarily legally related that will allow this individual to get in, get her hands dirty, figure out how the back and forth prompt, sub-prompt process works, maybe look at a couple of different platforms just to put her toes in the water. What would you suggest? That's a great question.
So 2 suggestions. One is a free newsletter from Josh Kubicki, who is really a leader in, I think, showing how to use generative AI. It's called Brainiacs. So literally as it's spelled. That's one newsletter that provides you with some help and a lot of guidance with respect to prompting and using these tools. And 2 is this service called Hotshot Legal offers a set of small bite generative AI video courses that can give you a really good introduction to the space and then an understanding of how they operate. It's inexpensive, it's high level, can really help you understand these tools without having to spend a boatload of money on some complicated tool or spend a lot of time on understanding one of these tools. And then my third suggestion is simply just play around with existing tools that you can operate for free or inexpensively, whether it's Claude, whether it's ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever you want to use. Just literally play around with them to just do things like, create a grocery list or evaluate this or what have you. It doesn't have to be legal related. And that'll give you a sense of how they operate, how they kind of interpret data that you give it and so on. And that's really a great first step to take, I would say.
I was visiting with my mother-in-law the other day, and we pulled up ChatGPT on my phone, and we're trying to come up with a homemade beef stew recipe, right? Because she couldn't find her favorite recipe. So I kind of talked to my phone. You can speak into your phone, everybody, to give the prompt. And we drilled down, and right in front of us, within a minute or two, we had this famous homemade beef recipe that we tweaked it to eliminate salt. We added more vegetables, and it kept on changing the ingredients in the recipe to accommodate her specific needs. It was a very basic way of using this, but it showed her the power of AI. And Colin, I think with lawyers starting off using it this way, they can get comfortable with the whole process before they start like, oh my goodness, now I've got a paid client that's relying upon the output and the decisions that I make.
Right.
Right. That could be a little bit overwhelming. So let's roll into legal specific solutions. So like with the company that you're involved with, when it comes to contracts, when it comes to some of the other companies that you have personal knowledge about, what are some things that you think we need to pay attention to as lawyers? Drafting contracts, using AI for predictive analysis, for document production, for helping us get ready for trial, all the above.
Right. Yeah. So there's a variety of different tools. Let me first recommend a resource to give you a sense of the breadth and depth of these tools. Legal Tech Hub is a great website that provides analysis and descriptions of all the different tools that exist currently, and it's constantly being updated. I would also recommend, in terms of your area of law, obviously Malbek, my company, is in contract management. We have generative AI functionality to help you review and analyze contracts. There's VLEX for legal research and case law analysis. There's also another company I should mention that is great for sort of analyzing sort of the fairness of a contract. It's called Term Scout. Big fan. It's an ability for you to see whether a clause is actually reasonable or not based off of prior contracts. There's a related company called Screens.ai that provides generative AI-based analysis of different types of contractual language, whether it's data privacy, indemnification, what have you. So there's a variety of different tools that are out there. There's also tools to help with e-discovery. There's Reveal. There's obviously LexisNexis and Westlaw and a variety of others, and Relativity. So it's really get a sense of the different types of tools and their capabilities. Again, I would recommend looking at resources to see how they all sort of stack up with one another, because it's easy to get overwhelmed by the breadth of tools that exist. And the problem is more and more coming to the market every day almost.
It is overwhelming. Like, I'm going to acknowledge that right now. I'm a geek and I love this stuff, but it's overwhelming. I look in the back of my book. I have a resource section. If those of you, I have AI in law, and it's at mitchjackson.xyz. Colin's in the book, everybody. But in the very back, I have two sections, Colin: non-legal resources, your everyday AI services. It's fun for lawyers just to play around with, get an idea of how this stuff works. And then I drop down to legal specific resources. Most of them are paid, which do the things. And Colin, I think I've got most of the companies you just mentioned. And if I don't, I want to include them because I do value your expert opinion on this stuff. But the point is to get started, right? Is to get started. And when you're getting started with AI, can you talk to us a little bit about how do we get our team invested or motivated or on board with this internal law firm AI effort? How important is that? What are some steps we can take? Because if you've got half of your team using one AI, another half of your team using another AI, some may be protected from privacy issues, some may be opening and exposing what you're typing in there to the whole world. I mean, there's a lot of security and data privacy issues involved with all the above also, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Which is why I think it's really important to use these tools in a controlled environment first and foremost, meaning in a small, on a small use case that's controlled by a certain set of team designated to use this tool, just so you can better understand it. I think it's also important to understand the security measures that are in place and have been taken by one of these vendors. For example, one thing that I am constantly looking for vendors that we use, or ones that others have heard about and want me to help them evaluate, is SOC 2 compliance, which deals with data privacy and data security. So that's something that's super important. I think it's also important to realize and look at, a lot of these tools and how your data is being shared. I know recently, people have been looking at ChatGPT's terms of service. The terms of service are really important to look at for all these different tools, because that will tell you by law, they have to, how they're using your data, how it's being shared, how it's being used, if it's being used to train the solution or not. I know it's something that Malbek frequently encounters, is we have a lot of customers that all ask us, we don't want our data to be used to train our AI. We don't do that. We wouldn't do that unless they ask us to, but otherwise we don't do it. And that's important to keep in mind as well. And I think this is security and data security is something that's going to be increasingly important going forward as technology continues to evolve, grow more powerful, and play a bigger and bigger role in each of our lives.
Colin, since I've got you here and we've just got a couple of minutes left, tell us a little bit, what does Malbek do? How does Malbek make contracts and document assembly production better, easier, faster, for those people that don't know?
Absolutely. So Malbek is, as you said at the outset of the show, contract lifecycle management software for large enterprise businesses. And the way we help those large businesses is through sort of helping with every stage of the contract lifecycle, from drafting to reviewing to negotiating to tracking to finalizing. So, think about all the different components that are involved in terms of drafting a contract, in terms of creating it, looking at it. And we've got all this built-in functionality to help with each one of those steps. And in addition, and this is something I appreciate, is because of the strong collaboration tools within the solution, I'm not a part of any long email threads about, final version X, final version Z, final version, WX. It's all tracked within the system, and you can even track who last touched the agreement, what changes were made, and even if you need to, revert back to a previous version so you can undo what had previously been done. And you can ping people through the solution so that people understand, oh, I need to look at this, I need to look at that, and so on. And then once you finally get through all the different steps with the contract, you can send it out for signature automatically. And then it's just uploaded to the system automatically, and it's there and it's active, and it automatically tracks different key contractual elements like renewal dates, payment dates, different other milestones that may be part of a certain agreement.
Uh, that just sounds amazing for someone that started off practicing using a yellow pad, and there were no computers, there was no internet. When I hear the term automatically, and when I hear efficiency and things that make my life easier as a lawyer, it just makes me smile. I mean, this is a great time to practice law. So
It is.
let's do this. Let's wrap things up, just because I want to respect your time and those of our mutual friends and community members that are watching and sharing, both live and recorded. If anyone would like to get back out to you, either about your book or to get you on a show or to talk to you more about the services that Malbek provides, I put up on the screen for those of you listening, colinslevy.com. But what's the best way for people to reach out to you, Colin?
Probably through LinkedIn.
Mm.
I'm super active on there. Send me a message. That's probably the best way. And if you're specifically interested in Malbek, send me an email, colin.levy@malbek.io. But honestly, LinkedIn is the best way to reach out to me.
And your handle for those listening and not watching on LinkedIn?
It's just Colin Levy. That's easy enough for you to find. And then on Twitter/X, it's CLevy_law, CLEVY_law.
Love it. Colin, thanks so much for being on the show today. This has been amazing. Thanks for writing your book and all the value you share on a daily basis across the platforms. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks everyone for joining us. We are live Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays most weeks at 7 Pacific. Great guests just like Colin. If you have any questions about what we talked about, reach out to Colin. If you have any challenges, reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with him. Between now and next time, enjoy this crazy upside down legal tech journey that we're all on together, and never stop making each day your masterpiece. Thank you, Colin. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks.